Good afternoon. Welcome to our Goal Line webinar about player and coach registration. Give a couple of moments here for some more folks to get themselves connected. But for those who are watching later, of course, you'll already know that this is being recorded. And as soon as it's over, you will automatically receive an email with a link to be able to watch the recording. You can also check out the Goal Line YouTube channel for any previously aired webinars. I typically put those recordings up onto our YouTube channel shortly after they've been completed, so you can always check us out there. Today, we're going to be going over registration for both players and coaches, but we are only going to go through the example once because the process to create a registration form, whether it's for players, coaches, registrants, or referees, is all the same process. It's just a matter of what person type you're selecting on the form. So we'll walk through some of those and get a much better idea of what we're talking about. The example website that I'm using today is an event search style site, which means this only has registration related items on it. It's not an actual full functioning website. This is not somewhere where you would go to get content about the organization or schedules, but a lot of organizations do use Goal Line registration tools, and then they create a link from their other website over here. So this is just another way for you to view using the Goal Line system for registration. But if you have your own full site, if you're using schedule tools also, then you might have a fully functioning website either in this similar shape or in our silver layout, which is a little bit more mobile responsive. Either way, you're going to log in using the admin login in the upper right-hand corner, and that's going to bring you to your Goal Line control panel. Once you've done some initial setup of things to get your system ready to go, you would have created things like any divisions that you run, meaning you run the whole thing, like the standings are managed by you and all of the teams register with you. Or you may have rep teams as well. Rep teams could be teams that play in a local league or in a league that's just managed either by another Goal Line site or another organization altogether. And your purpose for having those teams is to show their schedule for games and practices, as well as do all of your regular communication stuff. So once you have all of those things ready to go, you're going to be ready to start creating registration forms. If you don't already have a StackPay merchant account, you'll want to reach out either directly through support, and we can put you in touch with Trevor Scott, or you can go to the Getting Started page on the goalline.ca website. That will allow you to get in touch with us so we can get a agreement out for a StackPay merchant account. That's going to allow you to take online payment and have your members either pay all at once by credit card, or they can even pay by installment. When you're ready to create your registration forms, and you can do this even before you have your merchant account ready, as long as you see the tile that says individual registration forms, you're going to head in there and you can either edit or copy, or we can create a new registration form. So for today, I'm going to create a new one just so we can see what that process is like. I start by just creating the form name. You can see a couple of examples of forms that we've had here before, and typically the type of naming convention you're going to want to use is going to be something that includes the name of the season and the type of person. So if this is 2023 player registration, then it's simple enough to just use that as my title. So I'll use 2023 player registration. If I was to do this for coaches, I would just call it coach registration. And then when it comes to the form type, you can open up this drop down and you can see that you have different options. Goal Line is going to separate your person types into player, coach, referee, volunteer, and registrant. So when you want to register players, you're going to select the player type. If you want coaches, you're going to select the coach type, etc. So we're going to create this registration form. It's just asking to confirm that I want to create a brand new form, and I do. So I'm going to create that form, and it's going to immediately take me into this 5-step editing process. So the steps are generally set out so that you can set up your basic information about the form along with the personal information about the player it is that you're going to be collecting. Step 2 is our programs and products. So this is what they're actually selecting on registration to register for a specific program, and any products that you have available for them to purchase, whether it's a mandatory product or an optional product, you can add those there. Your policies page is pretty straightforward as well. We'll go through some of the required information there. And then your payment information, this is how you're telling the system that people are allowed to pay you for their registrations. And then the confirmation message is, of course, what they're going to receive when they've completed the registration. As you go throughout these 5 steps, you are gonna notice that there's all kinds of areas for you to enter extra information. The extra information is great for you to add information that might help your membership and your registrants to know that they're in the right place, and perhaps if there's any confusing questions or anything they might need this year that they didn't need in previous seasons, that you can enter that information here. A great example of this is going to be if this is your first time using Goalline as a registration system, your members may not know quite how to answer one of the first questions that they'll see on the registration form and that is, are you a returning player? So when you're a returning player, the Goalline system is going to know who you are based on your first name, last name, date of birth, and access code. The access code is automatically generated and it will be part of the confirmation message that they receive when they register. So if they've already registered in your system before, since you've been using Goalline, they have an access code and they would be considered a returning player. So a lot of times we'll see this extra information say, if you're registering for the first time this year, you probably don't have a Goalline access code. So say that you're a new player and it'll just ask for your information. If you have registered already, then use your access code. And then it basically just stops you from having to retype all the information that's already part of your player profile. You can update the title that you chose here. So sometimes people will just like the title to be player registration. And when you go to archive this form later, you can relabel it to be 2023 so that historically you're aware of what you're reporting on. So it's entirely up to you how you want to name your registration forms. The type of form can only be changed until there has been a registration. As soon as there's been a registration, you can no longer change the person type for this form. So if you accidentally selected player but you meant coach, you can make that change here and then everything will update accordingly. But once people have registered, you'll notice that this drop down becomes grayed out and you're not able to make any changes there. Membership forms and requirements are something that if your organization's not using those and you don't have a parent organization that's pushing required memberships, then that's not something you have to concern yourself with. The registration closing date is definitely something you do want to look at. It's going to default to be a year from the date you create the form. So if that's not appropriate, which it probably isn't for 2023 player registrations, we probably want them to be done registering maybe by the end of October, or let's say have lots of extra time. Let's go to November 30th. So this form will automatically close and no one will be able to register after November 30th. So on December 1st, this form is going to appear closed. On November 30th, people can still register. I'm always going to be able to come in and unpublish this form later, even if that date hasn't passed yet. And you can also cap your registration so that even if the date is still valid, if your programs are full, we'll look at that on step 2 here. They won't be able to register after your programs have all filled up. The enable, restrict, or require returning registrants in the Goalline database is exactly what I was alluding to when I referred to the first question that your registrants are going to see. They're going to be asked, are you a returning player or coach? And if they are, it's just going to ask them for their first name, last name, date of birth, and access code. They'll be able to retrieve that directly from the form that they're looking at using their email address that's in the system. But if they haven't registered before, then they just say, no, I'm not returning. And it opens up all of the required and collected fields for them to type in for the first time for you. And when they submit, you're going to be creating a player profile, and that player profile will automatically get a new access code for subsequent registrations. If you are using our shopping cart tools, which is where a lot of families are happy with that, where you can add all of your child's registrations into the cart and then pay all at once. When you are using that feature, your registration forms are also going to provide you an option to allow people to register for more than one program at a time. Allow registrant to register for multiple programs is a decision you make on a per form basis. Using the example of a regular season player registration, it's likely that you would not want players to be allowed to select multiple programs. This would be an appropriate option if you have camps or clinics, or if there are multiple tryout groups or skill sessions, day camps, summer camps, that type of thing. Whenever there are multiple options and it is appropriate for registrants to be able to select more than one, that would be an appropriate option, but it does apply to the whole form. So I would typically recommend your player registration only allows the player to select one program, and that program should be what is appropriate for them based on their age, scale, or gender, or however it is your organization breaks down your programs. If you are going to take wait lists, you're just going to set this setting to yes. Typically, player registrations don't have caps, but if it is something like a summer camp or a conditioning camp where there is a maximum number of players that are allowed, you might want to set a cap and then take automatic wait lists when they're full, and then you're able to register or invite them, sorry, to register off of the wait list. And then we'll move down to some other settings related to team registrations. Players could be allowed or required to set a team registration, a team assignment as they're registering. If that's something that you want them to do, then in addition to providing the information you're going to collect, it's also going to provide a drop down for them to select the division and the team that they should be assigned to. When they submit their registration, it's going to not just submit their registration and send their confirmation, but it's also going to assign them to that team. It's not required, and by default, this setting is set to no, so it doesn't appear on the form. If it's something they're allowed to do but not required to do, then you can set this to yes, and then it's optional. If they know their team, they can select it. If it's required, it means that they cannot proceed unless they're able to select the team that they're supposed to be participating on. These are settings that sometimes work really well after doing tryouts. If you've done tryouts already and players have been given the team that they're supposed to register for, you could potentially be using multiple registration forms to have players go through, register for their tryouts, and that way you know who's signed up for tryouts at different programs. And once they've received their communication that they're supposed to sign up for the A team or the double A team, etc., then they could be allowed to register for a team and select that team as they proceed through the registration. Because my site is using an event specific event style registration site, I have this event information that we're able to place on the form. This is information that would place itself at the top of the form and can provide some really good information to people registering. For regular season registration, this may not be super relevant, but for things like a tournament or if you run a lot of events with individual player registrations, this might be something that you want to set up, and that way they have that little bit of extra information. It also is where you're going to tell the system, where do we actually show this when we have it published on the site. So if I put this in the events category of athletes, then when we look and once it's published, we're going to see that there will be an athletes registration form available in here, and we'll be able to see that on the list. You can also set it as a featured event. So a featured event would be something that shows right away without having to search or drop in to any of the categories. So that's just related to that event search form. That is something that can be made available on some full sites, but it's typically something that we only see on these registration only sites. Priority registration is another one that you can optionally include. So you should see this option on your forms, but by default, it's not going to be applicable. And what's going to be assumed is that when you publish the form, it will be published from that moment until that expiration date that we looked at above that we set to November 30th. If you want your registration form to have kind of a staggered opening so that certain players or coaches are given a priority over others, you are able to set up some priority registration options based on a couple of different things. The first layer of that is going to be either to have registered for a specific thing in the past with this organization or with the code that you've assigned to that specific layer of priority registration. So if we wanted to say you get a 2022 priority, we can make that our priority registration code. So you get a 2022 priority code because I want you to register first in 2023. I can also select from a specific registration form that you would have used in order to register. And so as long as you've registered against that form, we're going to allow you to register for against this registration form. And what's great about this is you can set that so that that opens, let's say tomorrow, and then the general public can't register until maybe next Friday. So that gives our priority registration folks a week to be able to register before the general public, and that way we can protect their spaces in the program and then open it up to new registrants. You also have a second layer where you can say if you've registered in any event, let's say maybe you can start registering on Friday. So as long as you've registered with this organization in the past for anything, you would get that layer of priority. And you can also give that priority out by providing a second code to people for them to be able to get past that priority registration. So this allows you to have a staggered open and a general open registration. Just a quick note there too, you don't have to have that open registration date at all. You can keep it behind priority registration so that only people who fit these rules will be allowed to register, and it never has to open to the general public. So you do have all kinds of ways to restrict your registrations to only the participants that should have access to that. Another way to keep that registration loop closed a little bit is that when you go to view your form, I'll just click to preview it so we can show an example here. Obviously, we're not ready to publish this in any way, shape, or form, but we will see here that the URL of the form does become available for us here. Now we're looking at this in a preview because it's not saved and it's absolutely in test mode. But when your form is published, you can view that form and grab the URL and share that URL. So you don't necessarily even have to place it on your website. You don't have to place a link to it publicly. You can just grab that link. And if it's also protected by priority registration, then only people you've shared that link with who fit the priority registration rules will be able to register. So we'll just scroll back down here and get to the good stuff. So the good stuff here is collecting your player or coach information. By default, you are going to notice that first name, last name, date of birth, and in most cases, email address is going to be automatically set to required, and you're unable to set those as optional or not collected. That's because that is the way the goal line system is going to differentiate between duplicates and potential duplicates. It's also going to be one of the tools that's going to allow you to reconcile any potential duplicates that happen. And the email address being required ensures that they're going to receive their verification emails for setting up their shopping cart account or receive their confirmation emails from their registration. Everything else that's listed there as part of player information, you can set as required or as optional. If you have it set to no, it just means it doesn't show up on the form at all. Required obviously means it shows up and they have to answer that question in order to be able to proceed. In order to have programs that are gender specific on the second step here, you do have to be collecting and requiring the gender field on the personal information. It's very common for programming to be separated into male and female. And if that is the case and you have that set as a restriction, it is not going to allow you to publish your form without also collecting that gender so that the system is going to know whether or not to allow a player to register. The date of birth is already something you can't remove, but the date of birth will also work with those program restrictions to make sure that players cannot register for a program that they're too old or too young for. As we go down, you can ask additional questions if there's any other questions that you need to ask that aren't part of those standard questions. A common one is about medical questions, allergies, and that type of thing. So you can set that kind of question up here. It can be text boxes, radio buttons, check boxes, drop downs, or text areas, so people can answer those questions however you need them to. You can also set your questions as required so that they cannot proceed without answering them. If it's a question that you really just want on the back end, more for a verification purpose, you can set it as an office only question. So an office only question example would be something like age verified, or have they been through tryouts, or something that only an administrator would really be able to answer on behalf of that person. So an office only question would show up in the admin side of that player's profile, but it would not actually show up on the registration form itself. And then we get into parent or guardian information. So the Goal Line platform is going to allow you to collect parent or guardian one or two. The label of parent guardian is something that you can adjust. So I have used that label on my site here to call it parent/guardian. If you wanted to call that parent/emergency contact, or if you have maybe a bilingual version of that you wanted to put in, you can change this in the site configuration tool. It allows you to set that label that's going to be used for the parent guardian section. For most youth organizations, the parent/guardian label is the appropriate label because it's the most inclusive. And generally, another method of being more inclusive is to make sure that you require parent or guardian one, but that you don't require parent or guardian two. You are able to set those as required, but it's typically recommended to require the first parent or guardian and then just have yes to collect the secondary one without making it required. You can ask additional questions to those parents or guardians as well. And then as you can see here, some more of those areas where you can enter additional instructions. You can also add some information that you want folks to download or information that you want them to upload as they register. If you want them to download documents, you do go to the Manage Files and Images section of the Goal Line Admin control panel first in order to select the file that you want them to download. When you have that selected, you can say here that we want them to download that file. So this is wanting me to upload attachments here, but I'm not going to add one here. So that allows you, let's say you have a PDF document that you want folks to download that contains maybe a code of conduct or something you want them to have a copy of that's outside of their email, for example. You can do that. Or you can ask them to upload things, and a pretty popular one is going to be a photocopy of a driver's license or a birth certificate, depending on what type of participant is registering. So I'm going to save that information, and then we'll move on to step 2 and look at programs and products. The most important thing to think about with programs and products is that the program options are what they can register for. We give a little teaser text in a lot of these areas. So Bantam registration is one. Now, of course, most of us know we don't use those terms anymore for a lot of sport age categories. Now we're using a lot of the numbered. So U13, U15, U17. So if this was Bantam registration a couple of years ago, then we're talking about U15 registration. So U15 player. Now, it may be that you have a girls program and a boys program. So you might want a U15 boys, let's spell it right, boys player. And we can add that, and then we can add another U15 girls player option. So when I add my boys player option, I'm just going to copy that over into the payment details, and we'll call it the 2023 24 season in that payment details line. This is also where we can see some of those restrictions. So is this restricted by gender? And if I'm going to be offering male and female programs and I do need to keep them separate, then I would say that this one is restricted to males. And if it's U15, I don't want to do the math right now, but I would be figuring out what that birth year range is for a U15 player. It's probably born, January 1, 2010 or something, 2009, something like that. So we would put in that age restriction in there so that players with the correct birth date and that fit the gender are going to be able to select that program. And here's also where you can enter that maximum. So again, player registration, typically not capped, but let's say you can only take 30 kids. So you can set that maximum. You can show that publicly or not. Hiding it from the public side just makes it so that folks don't know whether or not the program has a cap or if it's full. Here's also where you're going to enter the price. So if it costs $500 to register for U15 boys for the 2023-24 season, then that's the amount I put in here. If my organization is required to charge sales tax on that, then I would put those sales tax percentages. If it's Nova Scotia and you are supposed to charge it, then maybe you put in 15 here. If you only have to charge a GST portion, then maybe you just put in the 5 or 6 there. And then you can also add a general ledger code. This is just going to help with the export of your financial data later if you have an external accounting program. So it just gives you an alphanumeric field for you to put in whatever general ledger code is appropriate for this player registration. If players are going to be allowed to pay later, so if they don't have to pay at the time of registration, then you can enter a due date here to say that they have to pay by a specific date. They'll receive a 7-day upcoming payment reminder, and then they'll receive a missed payment reminder if they missed the due date of the payment and their registration is still unpaid. So we'll save these changes here, and then we'll just see how quick and easy it is to go ahead and add another one. So my U15 girls needs to be added here. So we'll add U15 girls player. The only difference with this one versus the other one is that we'll make it for females instead. So female players, no cap on registration. It's still $500. So we can go ahead and save that. So now we've got 2 different programs to choose from. And then as we scroll down, we can see there's products and discount options here. Products and discounts are added in another area so that you have a set of products to choose from. And then on each one of your registration forms, you're going to be able to add or remove those products and discounts. So sometimes you may have to exit out of here, which all your progress gets saved, but you can exit out of here and maybe add some products. Looks like we have a product here. So I've got a training camp meal plan. So let's go ahead and add that. And now that is going to be a product that's available to choose. And so it has a price here already. Right now, this is just an optional product. But if I go into the product options over here, I can make this a mandatory product for either one program or all of the programs or just some of the programs. So I can make that mandatory. So as soon as you make that selection up here, it's going to automatically select the product down below. A great example of using the mandatory version of a product is something like a late fee that's applicable after a certain date so that you have to select it no matter what program you chose. It's also great for things like rep team tryout fees that are required in order to play at that level. There's also other options, things like volunteer payments or parent contributions, things like that, that are typically part of the registration process. And so you can add those as mandatory or optional products. Another example of products would be typical things like socks and shirts and hats and things like that. So if you have those to offer, you can add those products as well, and you can make them optional. Discounts are going to be the same way. So you would have available discounts. I don't have any available here, but you would add any discounts that you want to have. So if you have like a 50% off staff discount and any coaches get to use that discount, you can set that up. Early bird discounts are another example of what might go in there as well. So we'll move on here and get on to our policies. So policies are going to be required. The Goal Line platform does require that you enter in a waiver, a privacy policy, a refund policy, and physical contact information. We do also have space for a CASL message. So CASL, for those that aren't in Canada, stands for Canadian Anti-Spam Legislation Message. Even though it is a CASL message area, it is a great area for you to explain to your membership how you're going to be using their contact information and why it's so important for them to opt into receiving your emails, and how you plan on treating that over and above your privacy policy. These policies can be written in as a link to something that is available on the public side of your website. It can be a link to a file that's been uploaded to your Goal Line platform, or it can be your entire waiver and policy section spelled out. When you do spell out your waiver content, you can add these consent options throughout so that people can consent to individual paragraphs of your waivers, in addition to the overall consent option that you can set below. The overall consent option is either something you can set to a checkbox or to name input. The checkbox is pretty straightforward. You add your sentence, I agree to the above terms and conditions, etc. If you choose the name input, there are actually additional layers of validation that can go along with this. Not that one is any specifically better than the other, but having name input where it must match either the player or the parent or guardian's name, this just ensures that the person is typing in what you expect them to type in, as opposed to typing in just any characters to get past the name input typing. Your opt-in message again relates to opting into email communication. So you might want to make sure that you add something in there just to make sure that people do see that and want to opt in. If you are outside of Canada, then you'll find that the checkbox for opting in is going to automatically be set for you. Oh, I don't have any waiver content, so I'm gonna cheat by copying and pasting some information in here so that we can publish this form. So I'm just gonna add that in here. There we go. So when I saved it, I guess I went through that fairly quickly, but I saved it and it said it did save, but I was missing the required information. So had I gone to publish the form, I wouldn't have been able to publish it because it doesn't meet all those requirements. In fact, every time I try to publish the form, it's going to go through a list of everything that I'm missing in order to be able to publish this. So clearly we can see that I haven't reached step 4 and 5, and that's where our incomplete options are. So let's head on to step 4 and 5. So step 4, as I said earlier, is where you set how the participant can pay you. Permitting offline or cash check payments, if you are allowing them to register today and then pay you later with some other form of payment, either you want them to pay by credit card later or check later or whatever other method, you set that to yes. Otherwise, they do not have that option on the form. Processing online payments, again, if you set this to yes, they get that choice to say, do I want to pay by credit card or am I going to pay by some other offline method? If we do this where the offline option is not available and the online option is, then it does not provide a choice and they're not able to register without submitting their credit card payment. When you are allowing online payment, regardless of whether you're allowing them to choose between online or offline, you do have to select your payment gateway from this dropdown. So that's going to be where your StackPay payment gateway is listed. And it's generally going to look like StackPay, brackets, the name of your organization or whatever we've nicknamed your merchant account to be labeled as. So you would make that selection and then save your information. Because I am using a demo site that doesn't have a live merchant account, I'm going to set this to be that, yes, I do want that to be offline payment. And now we move on to the last step, which is confirmation message. Setting up your confirmation message is to make sure that the registrant is going to receive a personalized message from your organization. So the registrar's name needs to be there. Now, that doesn't have to be a person's name, it can be your organization's name, whatever makes sense. And then the registrar's email is going to go in here as well. It is required to enter the registrar's email address. If you have a generic info at organization.com email address, you can use that. If you have a generic treasurer or registrar email, go ahead and use that as well. This email address is going to be the email address that it appears to be from when I receive my email confirmation that I've registered. The next line is a copy confirmation to line. So this allows you to say that I also want registrar to get copies every time somebody does register. So I can register and I will receive my confirmation email from registrar. And then he's also going to receive an email with a complete copy of my confirmation email. That will always match up with what we see in the registration searches when we're looking through the registration search to see who's registered and signed up. But making sure that they have that copy of the email confirmation is just an added layer. Because you'll know what the subject line of that email is, it's nice and easy to create a good filter for that too. In the body of your confirmation email, you'll see all of these placeholder options over on the right-hand side of your screen, and you can update the body of your email so that it can be very personalized. So instead of just starting out with the default option here, thank you, you can say, dear player first name or dear parent one first name, that type of thing, and personalize it that way. Thank you for your registration. Our programming gets started on October 20th. And using the other placeholders that are already here, the registration data is going to display exactly what questions you've asked on the form and what, if any, answers were provided. And it's also going to provide the receipt, which is going to show what they paid. And if they did pay already by credit card, it would have things like transaction numbers on it. If they haven't paid, it's going to show the amount due. I also recommend showing this email on the confirmation page just because it finishes up that registration process on the public side nice and easy, and it really closes the loop for the registrant. And they'll also see a quick message that they'll receive all of this content in their email, but it's just nice to show that on that last page. So now that we have our email confirmation all set up, so we've set up all of our personal information and everything, we can go ahead and try to publish this form. Looks like we got it, so there were no required fields missing. Now I can click this view form option, and it's going to allow me to view this form on the public side of the website. Because we do have shopping cart enabled here, I am just going to sign in using my shopping cart account so that we can view this registration form. Oh, you know what I did? I went and put that on a priority registration, so I actually don't qualify, and so now I'm not able to register for this event. So that was kind of an accidental lesson here. So because it's under priority registration and I don't qualify, I'm not able to register until the 13th or until I think it was the 20th that we had set. So so I'm going to go in and just make an adjustment to that so that that doesn't prevent me from being able to register. But a good little accidental trip over that priority registration piece. All right, so I'm just going to remove these dates in here so that I don't have to worry about those registrations being under priority. All right. So this warning here is telling me that I'm making a change to a form that I've made published. And as soon as you try to make changes to forms that are published, they automatically become unpublished. All right, so let's go and view that again. I'm already signed in. So now that it's open and available for me to register, here's what it's going to look like when I first land on it. Are you a returning player? Yes or no? So this is why sometimes that extra information could be helpful. I know that I'm not a returning player. I'm new to this organization, so I'm going to say I'm not a returning player. And now notice how it opened up the rest of these options, and it's no longer expecting me to enter in an access code. So I can enter my information just fresh and go from there. So I was, what was it, 2000? Yeah, January 1st. I'm only 23. All right, so then we'll put in our email address. Because gender is set as required, we do have to go ahead and answer that. I'm actually going to change this to if no, never mind. I didn't restrict the female program. So I'm talking to myself here. So I can also select this league, and because I did set that as required, I do have to set that here as we go, so we can see clearly indicated required fields. So now I'm going to save and proceed, and now it's going to show me my program options. Because I set my gender as male, and the male program has a restriction, it's not going to allow me to register there. I can only select this option to register. Because I didn't set this as mandatory, I am able to check this option here now. And this option does have some additional attributes, so I can choose my meal plan and select regular or vegetarian meal plan as the attribute there. So, and if I do select that without selecting an attribute, it's going to make sure that I select my sub options. So picture that as something like a t-shirt order, and the sizes are required. So we'll go ahead and save and proceed. And this is going to ask me to review what I have entered. And now it's going to ask me to review all of your policies and my opt-in for receiving email. Agree to the above. So we'll say Amanda, and then add that to cart. Invalid consent. I don't think I may have actually created myself a little bit of an issue there too. Let me just double check what I wrote in on policies, because what I think I did, yeah. So I did make make it so that it had to match parent or guardian, but I'm not sure if you noticed that I didn't actually collect any parent or guardian information on the form. I specifically didn't, so that I didn't have to enter in that extra information. So let's just see if it's going to allow me to proceed, or if it's going to make me start over again, just because I did. There we go. Okay. I republished it while I was on that screen, so I just wanted to make sure. So now I've got my shopping cart here, and I could go and register another participant. I can register myself for something else, register another child, do whatever it is that I need to do there, or I can come to the screen and check out. I can trash this and just get rid of it altogether, or I can edit it and change up some information, change the program, or I can just go ahead and submit this. If I was required to pay online at the time of registration, this would be my Pay Now button, and I would select that, and it would ask me for my credit card information to pay. In this case, I'm just going to hit the Submit Offline Registration button so that we can get that registration submitted. And then we'll walk through just really quick how I'm going to see that on the other side and how I'm going to record that payment. So we can see here that this has been completed. Because we're in our shopping cart view and there could have potentially been multiple registration forms, we don't show that confirmation email here. But when you have a site where you're not using the shopping cart tools, you see that full confirmation email. So let's head out here. So now that we've created that form, we've looked at it, published it, and registered, I'm going to go to the Find Player tool in order to look for registrations that I had for players. If I was doing registration for coaches, I would go to the Find Coaches tool. Here we can see the registration information. So in this list, I'm going to see my registration forms that I can search. I have my 2023 player registration, and here are the two programs there. One quick note that is important, especially as the months go on. So if I'm searching in November for October registrations, the from date is always going to default to the first of the current month. And so this month, what we're seeing is October 1st to today. But if I do this on November 1st, it's going to go from November 1st to that day. So you do sometimes have to make sure that you're opening up this from and to date range for these registrations in order to capture them all. But you can, of course, restrict it to just do one day, or certain statuses, obviously, based on payment and that kind of thing. I'm going to select both programs because I want to see the search results for both. We know that we're only going to see the one search result here, but that's okay. So we'll see our search result, and we can see this is the player. It's not currently paid. They owe $500 for this program. There's also an additional amount owed for a product. So I'm going to edit this, and I'm not sure if you use this yet, but right click and open in a new tab lets you open that player profile in an new tab. So here we can see we have a total owed of $700. $500 is for the program that was specific to the form that we were registering for. And then the $200 is a product payment. If I receive these funds all at once, I do still have to record them both separately in here, but I can record if they want to pay me $200 today, I can receive that. They gave me cash in hand, so I can record that payment, and it's automatically going to update the amount due on this total registration. And now I can record the payment for the other $500. Let's say they gave me a check for that one. And so I can say that it was check number 123 and record that payment as well. So now we see that this registration has been recorded as paid in full. If I want to make sure they receive a receipt, they can retrieve the receipt on their own on the other side of the registration hub and in the personal registration account. But you can also send a receipt, and it's going to allow you to send that receipt to any email addresses that are on file. So if we had parent 1 or 2 information, we would see those email addresses listed here. But in this case, we just had the one, and it shows what was registered for. It shows how the payments were received, any comments related to those payments, and then the total amount due. So that is how we go ahead and create a registration form. That's how we go and proceed and look at it and register our participants. And searching for registrations is as easy as selecting the form and searching here. When we look at the search, there are ways for you to export the summarized information and the detailed information. So if we have 10 or 12 different programs, you can export a registration summary that would just tell you, based on all those programs, how many registrations do you have and kind of the total financials for those programs. Exporting the details is going to export the list of participants. You can also customize what you see in the results. When you click customize this list from here, it's going to take you to a tool called Edit Player Info Displayed. This tool is also available for volunteers, registrants, coaches, and officials. The player search column is what you're going to be concerned with there. So to customize that, you would check off all of the information that you want to see when you're looking at those search results with that extra information displayed. So you can do all kinds of extra check boxes here just to see anything that you want to see, any comments, current team. You can try to see their access code, their parent information, and there also you can add any other form specific extra questions. So any questions that you created to be part of your registration form, you can also show those in the results. These are going to be grouped by form, which means from year to year, you'll want to make a quick adjustment in here so that you're no longer looking at 2022's answers. You want to be seeing 2023's answers if you have custom questions there. So when you save changes to your Edit Player Info Displayed, it's going to retain those changes, and everybody's going to be using the same set of search results. So now when we return to do that exact same search in Find Players or Parents, I'm going to look for the option that says to show additional person details. And now when I do that same registration search, no other changes. It's going to change the way the results display, and it's going to provide additional information, or let's say different information than what we were seeing originally. So now we see things like the email address and current team, the address and gender and jersey number. These are things that I added in here. So now when I export these details will also be included. They do export to a CSV formatted file that's encoded with UTF-8. So you're able to open that up with Excel or Google Sheets and manipulate it as needed if you wanted to hand out maybe team lists or things like that for your coaches. So that concludes today's webinar on registration, how to create forms and how to publish them, register, and search for those registrations. I hope you found this one helpful, and we'll be putting it up on our YouTube channel shortly. Let us know if there's any other specific webinars that you'd love to see us do. Have a great day.